Kia ora, Clint Risman here from Land and Water Science. I'm the Principal Scientist and Technical Director. Today I was hoping to chat to you about physiographics. It's a bit of a mouthful, but basically we're talking about landscape settings and the important role they play in determining water quality and greenhouse gases. New Zealand is one of the most geologically complex countries in the world. Hugely complex, and current research is saying, look, Mother Nature, the variation in the landscape may account for at least 2 times the variability in water quality and soil greenhouse gases than land use on its own. That's a really, really important point. So to date, we haven't necessarily been thinking about what's under the hood, what's under our feet, and the role that plays in determining water quality and soil greenhouse gases. So today I really wanted to talk to you about the landscape's role in determining your environmental outcomes. A simple and perhaps a really well-known example of how much of an influence the landscape plays over water quality, for example, is when we look at the confluence of the Waikato and the Waipa around Ngaruawahia. In flood, these 2 rivers are chalk and cheese. One basically looks like a cappuccino of silt and milk, and the other one's got this clarity in it, and they come together, and where they merge, there's literally a dividing line between the 2 rivers. The reason that one is so full of sediment and looks so milky and the other isn't is because of the geology. The Waipa catchment, by its name, is characterised by a high proportion of mudstones, whereas the Waikato is characterised by a totally different rock type. So that fundamental difference is controlling that amazing difference in water quality that we see. So that's a really visible cue that we can see, and you can also see these things from looking at an alpine stream. You know, it looks clear and bubbly versus a stream that comes out of a lowland forest, which might have tannins, and they look different, they smell different, and they're totally different chemically as well. And the reason is the landscape characteristics are totally different. So when you go to a farm, and you can have 2 farms side by side, same farm practices, same management practices, same animal numbers, etc., and yet you get totally different outcomes. Why is that? It's because there could be variability in the soil, in the geology, in the topography side by side. It doesn't relate to a difference in land use practice typically at all. In fact, I'd be very surprised if there are major differences in land use between catchments often, and yet we see completely different water quality outcomes. So you can think about variation in water quality at a catchment scale. We can have 2 catchments, broadly similar area, very similar land use, but we get completely different water quality outcomes. One catchment may have an issue with sediment and E. coli, another might have an issue with nitrate, for example. Why is there a difference? And to some extent people have said, oh, it's the farming practices. Those farmers aren't doing a good job, or these ones are. But often the bigger driver is the landscape underneath their feet. The type of outcomes you get are strongly determined by Mother Nature. And that's so important. And so the question for a lot of people on the ground is, what do you have underneath your feet? What do you have in your catchment? What do you have underneath your farm? because if you know what you've got, you can have a really good handle on what your likely environmental risk is going to be it water quality, be it soil greenhouse gases. Having a sense of what is beneath your feet is a smart way to really target your investment in environmental, because soil variation, the geology, the topography of your property isn't changing anytime soon. Unlike the policy, unlike the rules which come and go, the stuff that underpins your farm production system is going to be around for a long time. And that's why it makes a heap of sense to really focus in on saying, what's causing these outcomes? Because bet your bottom dollar, the predominant control over the type of risk you have is your landscape. And not only is there a risk, but there's also an opportunity. There's an amazing opportunity to align your farm production with your landscape. And a really simple example might be, in some settings, you can have soils that are well drained, which means the water's going to go down through the soil. Yes, those soils have some risk of nitrate leaching, but if they overlie an aquifer that naturally removes that nitrate, the risk is significantly reduced. The reality at the moment is most people do not know if the nitrate they're losing is being removed or not. What we're trying to do is identify where and what is controlling water quality outcomes, including things like, hey, will the nitrate that I lose from my soil be removed before it reaches an aquifer or a stream? Or will I lose phosphorus from my property, or are my soils just really good at holding on to it? All of these things collectively add up to explain the pattern of variability we see in water quality, but also soil greenhouse gases across New Zealand. When it comes to water quality and soil greenhouse gases, the only way to really make sense of it is to take a big picture view, a holistic view of the landscape. We can't just look at the soil, or can't just look at an aquifer, or we can't just look at the topography on its own, slope, for example. Those sort of things on their own don't actually explain the variability we're seeing. It's only when we put them together and sort of visualize them as a multi-dimensional space, which is nature, that we can start to explain why we see variability. And the modern science approach to doing that is taking this bigger worldview and using data, using actual measurement from our environment to help us understand cause and effect. If you can understand cause and effect at scales of relevance to your catchment, or even more importantly, your property, you have the tools that you need to make strategic investment. I call it the sweet spot concept. Why would you invest a whole lot of money in something that's not relevant to you? And unfortunately at the moment, a lot of the recommended mitigations that are out there, they don't take account of the landscape. How do you know what to do where? And I've heard a lot of farmers say to me, why am I doing this? Because I know that it actually does something different. My farm, that paddock does this, it doesn't do that. It runs off here, but it doesn't run off there. That sort of knowledge is so important because you can start to use it to guide your investment in mitigating risk. What we're trying to do by providing that sort of holistic and modern science approach to understanding Mother Nature is provide the framework for existing knowledge that land users have. So your knowledge of the landscape is super critical. Your knowledge of your soil variability, your knowledge of which stream or which paddock has runoff events, the knowledge of your connection to the local stream through subsurface artificial drainage. All of these things collectively build a picture of what's controlling the environmental outcomes on your property. And when you know that stuff, boom, away you go, because it's the bricks and mortar on which your production system is built. And if you can align your production system to the underlying controls of Mother Nature, your resilience and your ability to meet environmental objectives goes through the roof. Not only that, the production system itself is inherently more resilient. Why is it more resilient? If you're aligning your land use to what your landscape can actually handle, your chances of being able to succeed in meeting environmental requirements has just gone through the roof. So I'd like to invite you to join us on a journey of discovery about how the landscape drives spatial variability in water quality and soil greenhouse gases. The reason for inviting you is so that you have an awareness of your local controls over water quality and soil greenhouse gases, so that will enable you to target your investment in environmental mitigation.